Welcome, everybody, to the regular meeting of council for Monday, January 22nd, 7 p.m. in City Hall Council Chambers. To call our meeting to order and recognize that we are doing our business this evening on the traditional territories of the Hupatchisitt and Sechot First Nations. Any late items, council? City Clerk, any late items?
One, Mr. Mayor, under correspondence H5 from Roland Smith.
Okay. Thank you. Then we'd like to make a motion to approve. To approve the agenda with the addition of the late item H5.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And council, we also have minutes. The special meeting held at 5:30 p.m. and the regular council meeting held at 7 p.m. on January 8th. Motion to adopt those minutes.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Brings us to C, the public input period. It's an opportunity for public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. Maximum of 4 speakers for no more than 3 minutes each can be accommodated. But you wish to address council. Is this one group of 3 or is it 3 separate ones? Okay. So Ellen, we'll take you first, but even though we know who you are, you're going to need to identify yourself when you hobble up to the mic, please.
Hello, I'm Ellen Frood. I'm with Alberni Community Women's Services Society up on 3rd Avenue here in Port Alberni. So thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city staff, and members of the public. Always great to be here at council to have the opportunity to voice my quiet thoughts. How does that sound? So again, and on the agenda, we have conversation with our city manager's report. Thank you so much for doing that, Tim. It is appreciated to bring that forward. Many great comments from the public. I think that out of all of this, one of the things that I would really request of council is that there is a very strong, that they're not a very strong, but there is a commitment on behalf of council to some action as relates to housing. While we have lots of problems in many areas, we cannot attribute this to drugs only. That is a mental health issue and addictions, and there are agencies that work with that. So I think that as an agency, I have a great plan. We're going to develop some housing ourselves, and we can drop that anywhere in town. But I need the city to come to me and say, here are the pieces of property that we have, and here's our commitment to working with you and partnering with you to be able to drop that unit onto that property. So please, that's really important for me. I want to point something out also. We recently had one of our security cameras broken, smashed, and not repairable. And our cost to replace that is just under $1,000. So while I can appreciate a conversation about $25,000 in council or in funding to help local businesses support the installation of CCTVs, $25,000 is a very small drop in the bucket. And I want to make that really, really important. So really, that is my point. My point is about housing first and making that a critical and important need that the council commits to, that we don't just talk about it, but there is a firm commitment from council to partner with housing service providers such as ACOS. So thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Okay. Please come forward.
My name is the Reverend Brendan Estegard Paul. I am the pastor priest at Trinity Anglican Lutheran Church, just down the block on the corner of Angus and 5th. I'm here as a newish resident of Port Alberni, just having moved here 14 months ago. One who works in the neighborhood, whose church building was broken into 3 times last fall. One who is proud to call Port Alberni home, and one who lives by the edict and the value to shop local, to live local. I wish to speak to you as you determine how you will address the big city problems evident in Port Alberni, particularly in the uptown area. I ask you to remember to consider the needs of all the people that make up this community that you serve. It begins with security. Those who wish to shop or come to places of entertainment within these surrounding blocks, but are frightened to do so. Those who wish to remain in business, but are questioning continued viability. All need to feel safe and secure, as do those who live in this area, whether homeowners or renters struggling, or those who are struggling to find a place to lay their head. All deserve your respect and consideration. Housing affordability, especially for renters, is a huge issue. Please use the levers accessible to your office to partner with other levels of government and create the opportunity for people to have economical, viable choices as to where they live. Create some type of mechanism that has teeth for those who are being taken advantage of by non-resident landlords, the people who do not have a secure place to lay their head. For them, hopelessness, it's easy for it to take root, and nothing else is possible. Do all you can to create the opportunity for locals in this area to have a grocery store. Not everyone has a vehicle or can afford its upkeep. Affordable, available food can make a huge difference in a family's budget, health, and well-being. And speaking of transportation, do all you can to ensure that public transportation is efficient, timely, and plentiful. Again, not everyone has a vehicle. Effective public transportation can make the difference in being employable and employed, or being able to receive timely care and support. Do this well, and there will be those who choose public transport in the name of environmental concerns. A healthy community is one where all of its parts are considered and functioning well. Someone once said that you know that a community is healthy when those that are the most vulnerable, those with no voice, are able to thrive and have hope. May the choices that you make as you lead us in regards to all of these matters, well, may it lead it for others to be able to say that Port Alberni is a healthy place and a thriving place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. John Douglas, 2132 Motion Drive. Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public, staff, just thanks for this brief opportunity. Basically a thank you. A few items I just wanted to cover. Our polar bear swim, which we held on New Year's Day, was another great success. Thanks to the contribution of a lot of members of the public service groups, as well as the city staff, who just had a really good support in that regard, a good turnout. As a result of that event, we were able to raise roughly $1,500 for local charities. So it's really turned into a really great event, well orchestrated, and just wanted to thank you for your support in allowing that to continue happening. The other thing I wanted to say is just a lot of people don't recognize the work that you do, and it's a difficult, challenging position you have to fill here. So just a recognition of what you've done over the last few years, and as you work your way through the budget and all the other challenges that are coming up, I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the community to all you folks who do this in this room here throughout the year. The last item I just wanted to cover is a bit of a project I'm working on behalf of the Port Alberni Maritime Heritage Society, as well with our Heritage Commission, which involves discovering the location of some tunnels that used to exist underneath the Harbour Quay Hill, also known as where the Sea Cadet Hall used to be. And we're trying to find the entrance to these. A number of people have attested to where they may have been. There's no apparent record, so just wanted to appear here in camera and And with the crowd here, if there's anybody here that has any information about that, we'd love to hear about it. And that could be channeled through the Heritage Commission, through Jamie Morton at the museum. And what we're hoping to do is establish another little talking point on the historical walking tours that we'd have down on the waterfront there. So that's really what I wanted to cover. So I appreciate the time. And just in light of the previous two speakers, I just want to emphasize that we really appreciate your concentration on working on those issues as well. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, council. Don't appear to be any delegations this evening, so it brings us to our unfinished business. First item is from the Chief Administrative Officer. We had we requested that he bring forward to council his report, and we requested he bring it forward for further discussion. Any points council wishes to make? Councillor McClellan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I don't know, should we accept the report first and then go back and debate it? Or if you want to accept the report first, I'll make the motion to receive it.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All those in favor of receiving the report from Mr. Ply? Carried.
Okay. I like the report, Mr. Mayor. There's a few things in it that I don't think we can do it at this time, and maybe some things I'm not 100% we should do at all. But in Maine, I think it's good, and I'd like to go through it item by item and vote on to do them, put them off, or put them with another one. I think council needs to give direction to staff and to look at it. So I don't mind starting with number 1, reducing drug addiction in Port Alberni. It's really a no-brainer. Nobody wants to have drug addicts in their town, and no one wants to be one, I hope. But it happens, and so really the action and cost here is really the city through its advocacy policy and providing incentives for the development of safe housing and support programs. And it's really it's project driven. We have a lot of non-government organizations that are doing it, and I think we can support them. And so that's that's my opinion on that one, and maybe others have others on it. But I have comments on lots, but I'll be quiet for now.
Okay, sorry, Councillor McClellan, but we want to make sure that we don't interfere with what city residents are interested in commenting on this as well. So we want to make sure that we've provided an opportunity for residents to bring forth their ideas.
I was told we delayed that meeting till March, is why I made the motion to have this done today.
Oh, I see.
I got no problem with people here talking about this
Okay.
at all. Might be here a while.
I just want to make it clear to the community that we're not preempting their input. So there, we could be another opportunity for public input into this as well, I would suppose.
Yeah, and I think we heard loud and clear after the last meeting not to wait 3 months to go into it. And this proposal was there, and people seem quite pleased that it's being brought up today. So.
Okay, so let me not stop you, because you're on a roll. So carry on if you've got other things that you want to talk about.
Well, I'm sure other councillors must have something they'd like to say, but I would make a motion that we adopt this number 1 and 2 and put them together. They're not a cost item necessarily. They are proposals. They're advocating things, and really, I thank the CAO for putting this stuff together.
Okay.
So I would like to, if you're looking for motions, I would, the next couple are far more interesting, but I'd like to make a motion on this.
I'm quite happy to entertain your motion if somebody wishes to second it. Somebody wish to second?
I'll second it.
Councillor Minyus, thank you.
But-
And you wish to speak to it?
I wish to speak to it.
All right.
I'd like to second it just specifically to speak to it. I'm not sure this is something that we just simply make a motion to adopt and then move forward from. I see number one as being more than just advocating to senior levels of government. I think, as Ellen Frood just spoke on, us needing to actively partner, which is what we'd sort of talked about with this number one. I think we need to do more than just adopt it and move on. We need to talk about how we're going to partner with housing providers and other agencies in town who are providing services to our residents. I would say if we just adopt this and move forward, we'll probably never look back at it and nothing will ever come of it. So I'd like to see us take more meaningful steps than just adopting it. And I'm not sure if this meeting is the right place to do that specifically. I like the intent, but I just want something more concrete.
I like the intent too. I think it's really important to do this, but I also think in order to address, because this is a very, very big report, in order to address it, we could literally take far more time than we've got this evening just on this one item, because it's a big project.
I think endorsing the fact we want to do it is a good start. The next meeting, I'm hoping, we'll have a lot more solutions from different groups. The last one, we heard all the problems. And I think in that we should say, we want to go in that direction. The direction we're not going to know until after we get the full public input and the people who want to do it.
Well, it definitely gives public an idea of where we want to go, but I don't think we're going to find solutions to these this evening.
Okay, well, if you don't. Okay.
But
If you want me to just carry on and.
No, we've got a motion on the floor,
Okay.
so we need to.
So let's. move it.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Okay, Councillor Alberni?
Can I just get an idea of exactly what the motion is? I'm not sure if it's sort of the first action, the number one there, or is it 1 and 2, or?
I believe it's a combination of 1 and 2, but
Correct.
City Clerk, what do you have for the motion?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is 1 and 2 as well, but I would ask Councillor McClellan to confirm his motion.
Okay, that we can, through advocacy, provide incentives for development of safe housing, community-based support programs. And I realize that number 2 is different, but I would think that would cover number 2. So let's just leave it at that one motion. And that would be fairer and more clear.
Okay. Councillor Minions, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was intending it to be just number one as well. But I'm interested in hearing from CAO what he thinks would be a reasonable first step on this, because, provide incentives for the development of safe housing and community-based support programs. Again, I don't feel like this is something we can just adopt. What are our next steps if we want to move forward with this?
Mr. Mayor, on bullets 1 and 2, reducing drug addiction in Port Alberni through helping to reduce drug addiction and discouraging people who continue to be drug addicted, discouraging them from being in our community. If council was to endorse, if you like, those concepts, you could direct staff to bring back specific reports on actions that would address those concepts. And if council doesn't want to take the formal step of endorsing tonight, you could still ask staff to bring back reports with specific actions that would address those concepts.
Yeah, Councillor Sauvé?
Yeah, I just don't want to forget the fact that we do have, dealing with housing and so forth, we do have committees that are already doing some work or trying to. If we could get all the partners together and have a conversation and discuss what the city can or cannot do. When it comes to make Port Alberni undesirable for people with drug addiction, it's keeping in mind that every community has issues with drug addiction. So, I just don't feel comfortable with that one. So enforcement is one thing, but the bigger issue is treating these people with addiction and not just simply forgetting them and banning them is not the solution. So I would like to see more something about locally treatment for our residents. I'm not about to go out and start kicking out somebody that lives in their community because they're a drug addict. These are people who are residents of this community, and they're going to stay like that. Just wanted to voice my opinion.
Okay. Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Alleman.
Just the way I read the motion, and really by accepting this recommendation, I really think it opens the door for dialogue. As Ms. Frood alluded to, it gives us some direction to open into dialogue, working together in partnership, or to advocate on those behalf. And I think that's simply the motion. It gives us the opportunity to do that now. We're accepting it into council, and it gives an opportunity to move forward.
Okay, Councillor Alleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be more inclined to vote for something that was action based. So I think all of council agrees with the intent of the report, and I don't think we need necessarily to endorse it one by one. But if staff could come back with something concrete that we could do and endorse, then I think that would be a lot easier to swallow. I mean, the first one especially, I think, is an obvious piece that, you know, we can work with the community stakeholders initiative to end homelessness group and those folks, the Social Planning Commission. So there's opportunities there. The second one is, I think maybe the headline, an undesirable location for people who are drug addicted, sort of gets away from what the actual issue is, which is the people who are in charge of the buildings, causing that substandard and unsafe condition, and addressing those more so than the victims. So I don't know. I would much rather simply direct staff to come back with some concrete ways that we can move forward, rather than just endorsing, I think, something that we've already endorsed in a couple of meetings already.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just going through the CAO's report, and at the bottom, he makes a recommendation that the Council for the City of Port Alberni consider an immediate implementation of all actions outlined in this report to reduce drug addiction in Port Alberni, reduce crime, eliminate locus of crime, and support existing local businesses. I think that says it all right there, sir. I'd like to make that a motion when I can get that in.
Well, if that's the case, we've got a motion in front of us, so we have to defeat that motion and then replace it with another one if that's what we choose to do. I don't think it's that any of us are disapproving of the intent. It's just one of the path that we're going to go. Okay, so on that basis, I think everybody's had an opportunity. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried?
And I'll second the motion from Councillor Washington.
Okay. So just to be clear, Councillor Washington's motion is that the committee of the whole...
The Council of the City of Port Alberni consider immediate implementation of all actions outlined in the report to reduce drug addiction in Port Alberni, reduce crime, eliminate locus of crime, and support existing local businesses.
Okay, and that's what you're seconding?
That's
Councillor
right, Mr.
Suri?
Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClement?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, like I said, I support the vast majority of this report, but I will ask for a recorded vote on this.
Okay.
I cannot support all of it just like that. The budget implications are hundreds of thousands of dollars. We have not talked about them, and it's very unwise to just put ourselves in a bind by accepting everything in here. I would like to see some of the numbers in here increased. So my next motion was going to be on the thing at the bottom of page 3 of the report, or 22 of our agenda. And I would like to see that $25,000 for cameras and lighting on businesses go up to 100,000. Maybe it's too high, but, you know, to just adopt the hundreds of thousands of dollars that are here, I don't think is wise, and I will be voting against that motion, but I will be voting for a lot of stuff if we go through it now.
Okay, thank you.
And, you know, people have told us they want something done. They
Right.
don't just want an idea passed or something like that. But if council doesn't want to, that's okay, but I want my vote recorded that I do want to.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Minions?
Nothing to say.
Nothing to say. Oh. Could you record that, City Clerk, please?
That's the first time.
Okay. Any other comment on the motion? Yes, CEO.
Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, there are some cost items in there, as you've heard. Does this motion, if passed, mean that you're approving those cost items?
Well, that's,
Is that the intent of the motion?
that is the intent. Is that the intent of the motion?
Okay, thank you.
So the cost items, regardless of what they are? Okay. Any other comment? All right, then, on this motion, Councillor McClellan, you're calling for a recorded vote?
Please.
Okay, then let's start with Councillor Washington. Okay, Councillor Alberni,
In favor?
Councillor Minions,
Against.
opposed? Councillor Paulson,
Against.
Councillor Sauvé,
In favor?
and Councillor McClellan.
Against.
The motion's defeated.
Can-
So,
Okay.
so now, Councillor Minions.
I'd like to make another motion. I move that staff bring back a report providing steps to moving forward to partner with or provide incentives to service providers of safe housing and community-based support programs.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion. Councillor Minions.
I guess I could speak to this.
All right.
I think it's just a wise first step to us. We are in the middle of budget right now. I think this is something that we all want to move forward with, the right steps for. This might be a larger project than just, you know, starting with security cameras, which I'm in favor of also. But I think that this is the time for us to determine how we're going to partner with service providers and how we're going to get involved in providing safe housing in our community. So just a report to tell us what some of our options are.
Okay, Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, it's very easy to support that motion, and it covers several things that are in the report without touching the money things. But I do think we should be debating some of these money things tonight. I know it's not budget debate directly, but we should be making ourselves aware of what's there and for the budgets. And for that reason, I would have some other motions to make on that after this one passes, if it does.
Well, depending upon how we deal with this motion, we may not be finished with this item. So, Councillor Sauvé.
Yeah, I just want to voice my opinion here. I'm getting pretty much sick and tired of people saying that this council is actually not doing anything and we're just rubber stamping things, because there are things that are being done in this community by several committees and by several agencies and so forth, that we are addressing a lot of the problems. So to sit here and say that we're not doing nothing is totally wrong. So I just want to voice that opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
The only reason why I went against the motion is I think it does warrant going back to looking at the dollar values in here. It was mentioned that maybe the security camera program might be a little light. We need to discuss that rather than rubber stamp. And certainly there's a larger cost item in here with regards to bylaw services that we need to discuss as well. So we need to have a chat with that.
Councillor Alberni.
Just want to make the point that whatever we do, it's going to cost money, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So whether we decide to spend the money today or tomorrow or in a week or whenever, it's still going to cost the same amount of money. I would have rather started today, but that's okay.
I like the suggestion that we get a clear report back to us from staff as to what the breakdown on these costs. So, Anything else on the motion? City Clerk, could you read back that motion, please?
Thank you.
Oh,
I will read back the
Thank
motion.
you. Yes, I was going to request that.
I move that staff bring back a report providing steps to moving forward to partner with or provide incentives to service providers of safe housing and community-based support programs.
And you emailed that to the dean.
I was about to when it was asked to be read back.
okay. Councillor Washington.
Sorry, where does that leave the rest of this report then? You've dealt with the housing, but it just,
Then
what
we'd
about the,
Then we'd still need to go back into the rest of the report to see if there were other things that people wanted to talk about. All right. So on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, so council, we're not finished with this report yet. And so we've dealt with the issue now of housing. Not sure if it has anything to do with drug addiction or theft or property crimes, or it has anything to do with prolific offenders or low key of crime or existing businesses. Not sure if any of that.
It has anything to do with all of that.
Councillor McClellan.
Mr. Mayor, I understand that the time is, probably limited to debate on this tonight, but I would like to not keep putting it off. Next meeting. I actually agree with Councillor Alberni, which is kind of spooky. But I would like to make a motion that we ask staff then, people are concerned about the money, so I like the seat. I'm going to list some things, then make a motion referring to them. The cameras and the lighting, the eliminate the low key of crime and all the rest of it that comes under bylaw and RCMP. And those two things will take a bit of money and take a lot of planning. But I'd like to move that we ask staff to come back next week with a more detailed plan on how that would look financially and how that would work practically. The bylaw officer, the manager for the bylaw officer that's in this report, the cameras for the businesses, and I have one other motion I'd want to make after that's a different subject.
Okay, so is there a seconder for this motion before I ask the CAO a question about this?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, CAO, my question to you is this doable, in your opinion, by the 29th?
Mr. Mayor, it would have to be done by Wednesday to make the agenda deadline, but this is a priority, so I think this is doable. We'll make this doable, and we'll have a report outlining an implementation plan and associated costs for that property subsidy program and the bylaw enforcement piece. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alemany.
Isn't the bylaw enforcement piece already in the options list for the budget, or is there more to it than that?
It's there, the same as it is in the report here, but if council's looking for more detail on what the breakouts are and how that would implement in a timeline, we can do that.
Okay. All right, any other councillor minions?
Is the bylaw enforcement piece something we could get early approval to in the budget so that we can start with the hiring process rather than waiting until the budget is fully approved?
Yes, council can give early approval to anything that you choose to prioritize.
Okay, anything else, council? On the motion then, all those in favor? Carried. Councillor McClellan, you had one more item you wanted to
The
bring
other
up.
one, Mr. Mayor, is I don't think it's a cost to the city, but one of the recommendations that came out here is support existing businesses. And I noticed today, my wife brought home a flyer from that other councillor there's wife, for the uptown businesses are actually getting together and they're going to try and revamp their group, and I think that's good, and I think we should encourage them. And I would just like to make a motion that we encourage the businesses to do that and support them where we can.
All right.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion? Counselor Washington, did you want to say anything? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Carried.
And I think it's a good flyer that she sent out.
Okay. So on this, have we completely moved to receive this? Yeah, okay. So then I think that's, unless there's somebody else has something, Councillor Alberni?
Did we formally adopt a resolution to have the community policing office come back up onto Third Avenue?
No, we haven't.
Should we do that if we would like to consider that?
Well, if we're going to discuss it, it definitely has budget implications, so now is a good time to do it if we're going to consider it.
I'd like to make a motion to that effect. To investigate the costs of moving the community policing office back up onto Third Avenue.
If we're going to, for me, if we're going to investigate the cost of that, some of the costs are sort of unknown costs, and one of them would be the cost of, what would be the cost to Harbor Key of moving it out of there? Because if my memory serves me right, it was moved there, at least partly because there was concern about crime in Harbor Key, so it was moved down to create a greater presence down there. So, you know, are you creating a problem in one place in order to address a problem in another? Maybe that could be part of it as well. What may be the implications in terms of criminal activity? Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, I think we may, in part of the study here and part of our discussion, I don't think it should take time either. I absolutely agree that they should move up almost immediately. When you look at other communities that are the big cities that have the big problems, like Granville Street in Vancouver, where they had a community policing booth there, and they had volunteers as well as city police in that case, and people who were, I don't know if they were homeless or not, but they definitely needed some soup in the meal, and some nights they would feed them and that, and maybe there is some conjunction there with the Bread of Life who already do that, and if there's a visibility there, I think it's a good idea. I think the police visibility is excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sauvé?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support the police visibility, but council has to keep in mind, as into putting dollar figures behind such a move, that there's actually, through the RCMP, a requirement of a certain structure of buildings and, you know, all that sort. I'm sure the inspector here could explain a bit more that these requirements have to be met before they would put any RCMP volunteer into an establishment there.
Okay, thank you. City Clerk, the motion again, please.
And that staff be directed to investigate the costs of moving the community policing office to Third Avenue.
Okay. Thank you. And it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, moving on, Council. Councillor Sauvé?
Sorry, I promised I wouldn't do it tonight, but I just want to make sure if this was an appropriate time, if we're talking about the financial plan for budget, I wanted to have discuss to council about the police budget is scheduled to require one less position next year, and I have strong concerns about the city making certain predictions as into implementing that budget. Would this be the appropriate time for us to recalculate this five-year plan budget?
Can we bring that up on the 29th, since we're going to be discussing those things on the 29th at that point? This isn't a real budget meeting.
No, I understand, but we're voting on stuff that will affect the budget. So I'm
Let's leave it
okay
till the 29th.
if you say so.
Yep. Okay, Council, we have a letter dated January 28th from Chris Washington, providing input and suggestions for consideration following committee of the whole meeting. That was held December 19th regarding strategies to address issues of crime and property maintenance. We have a suggested motion there, Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, I would move that we receive the letter from Chris Washington and send her a thank you for sending it. And I would like to comment on the letter itself if we get a seconder.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And you can see in here, those, we've all read the letter by now. One of the prime things that Ms. Washington and the businesses in the neighborhood where she has her flandangles, think the community policing office should be moved like now. They think that should be one of the first, they call it an immediate action. And they say within 6 months. With immediate to me is a bit sooner than that. And I understand there's problems, as reported by Councillor Sauvé, that there's certain things, certain protocol have to be made, certain safety features have to be there for, especially if there's actual RCMP officers in it. But those things I think can be overcome, and at least let's hope so. And they can't be, then show us why not. And her other comments here we've already covered in some of our passing of the CIO's report, tighter bylaws and better enforcement of them, and that will definitely be coming up in the report we'll get back from the CIO. And I'd once again like to just say thank you for the work that is in that report that we just voted on.
Okay. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor McClellan, thank you for the shot about the small businesses to encourage and support and assist potential small business owners. As for Ms. Washington's letter, many of the short and long-term ideas were addressed by the CEO. And as Councillor McClellan mentioned, the Uptown merchants are having a meeting on January 24th at 6 p.m. to start looking at ways to assist and or work with the city and or RCMP to make important changes. 52 notices were delivered to the entire area from Harbor Cree up Argyle to 5th Avenue, 1st through 4th Avenue between Kingsway and Mar. And also a reminder that the Chamber of Commerce luncheon January 31st will have several of the Uptown merchants to speak. So there'll be a discussion around the issues that'll take place. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sauvé?
Just a question addressing it for that meeting that's going to take place. Is this open to the public or is it just strictly for the Uptown merchants?
It actually seems that we're getting off of the motion at this point. So if we could focus on what the motion is and... Okay. City Clerk, the motion again?
The motion, Mr. Mayor, is to receive the letter from Chris Washington providing input and suggestions for consideration following the Committee of the Whole meeting be received with thanks.
Okay. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. All right, Council, that brings us then to staff reports. First report is on accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the certification of the Director of Finance dated January 22, 2018 be received and checks numbering 140522 to 140608 inclusive and payments of accounts totaling $512,267.49 be approved.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And then the next one is from City Clerk, and it has to do with the alternate approval process for Stevenson property on the upper end of Argyle Street, boundary extension for the city. Councillor Sauvé, do you want to move receipt of that report for us,
That
please?
the report from the City Clerk dated January 16, 2018 be received.
Okay.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried.
That the City of Port Alberni has obtained the assent of the electors to petition the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to extend the boundaries of the City of Port Alberni as it appears in the Gazette under issue number November 30th, 2017, and in the Alberni Valley Times issues of November 29th and December 6th, 2017.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Can we keep going? Okay, just keep going then.
That all
Councillor
relevant legislative requirements pertaining to a municipal boundary extension in the Local Government Act and Community Charter have been completed. That the parcels approved for inclusion within the City of Port Alberni are as follows: Lot 5 and 6, Block 16, District Lot 132 ACRD.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And from the fire chief, we have an application for funding for the Fire Smart Planning Grant Program. We have his report dated January 15th, requesting support for the proposed application for funding for this planning. Welcome, Chief Gilday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last year, we put in a grant application for $10,000 in conjunction with the Regional District for Fire Smart education in the Valley. We weren't able to complete everything because we couldn't get the support from the BC Wildfire Service. They were providing some of the training for Fire Smart champions. Anyway, we want to proceed with that again this year and try and make that happen so we can apply for the same grant again. So we put an application forward for funding through us and for the Regional District as well. So looking for council support.
Okay. Councillor Paulson.
That the report from the fire chief dated January 15th, 2018 be received, and council for the City of Port Alberni support activities proposed in the application for funding to the Strategic Wildfire Prevention Initiative Fire Smart Planning Grant Program, that's a long one, and its willingness to provide overall grant management.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion? Councillor McClement?
Yeah, so this is something we need the provincial fire service to be involved in, or can we do some of it on our own?
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, it works better. The BC Wildfire Service could provide the community champion training, which is free training. It's about $5,000. So if we go through them, we can get that training most likely free of charge, and they can provide it here in the Valley. It's a level of expertise that they have that we don't really have, so we look to partner with the BC Wildfire Service, and it works better when you involve them in doing it. They're the experts in wildfire, and so they'll come into the community and work with us to do that. So with us and the other Valley chiefs, we put it together in conjunction with the BC Wildfire Service, so it's my recommendation that we work with them. So.
Okay. And so if we get this grant, or even if we don't get the grant, we should probably do something. This is to train all our fire crews in the Valley how to fight a wildfire and keep it away from the town, because there's not a whole lot of easy ways out of here if one gets going. I know I've been harping on it for a while, but it still spooks me.
Yeah, it's not for training of the firefighters. This Fire Smart training is for the residents, the private landowners and residents, how to look at their property, clean up their property, and make their property fire safe, so that if we do get a wildfire starting from outside the city and coming in, then we have an opportunity to try and stop it from getting into the housing and that. So it's information and training for the residents on how to look at their own properties and fire smart their properties to make our job a little bit easier. So.
Okay, and while I completely support this, Chief Gilday, I'd hope that we're actually going to go beyond that, or I hope we can apply for grants to go beyond that, because literally there's dozens of years of work around this city to get rid of a lot of the understory and reduce our susceptibility to fire. And Councillor McClement is fond of saying that our biggest risk as a city is not from tsunami, is not from earthquake, it's from wildfires. And that can happen to us in any dry period, which can typically happen from June right through the end of September, or even October. And this year, for the first time, of course, as you well know, California had fires in the wintertime, which they weren't expecting.
Right.
So it's a big deal for us as a city, a big risk for us. So hopefully this is one of a series of things that we can.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's part of a three-phase kind of approach to it. We're going to provide the Fire Smart training to the residents to look after the properties there, and that we're working with the regional district to provide a new CWPP, which is a Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which will give us the background information we need to go forward with the third phase, which is grant funding to try and do some of the mitigation work for that. So it's kind of a three-phase approach, working with the ACRD to try and make it all happen in the Valley.
Great, thank you very much. Then, seeing no more questions on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Chief Gilday. And from City Clerk, we have a motion for updated grill for, the a lease for Starboard Grill and down at Harbour Quay. So, Councillor Alberni, you want to make that motion for us, please?
That council for the City of Port Alberni authorized the mayor and clerk to enter into a lease for Unit 5 at the Alberni Harbour Quay with the Starboard Grill Limited, DBA Portside Cafe and Fine Foods, for the term ending December 31st, 2019 at the current monthly rent of $724.50 plus GST.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the folks at home in clarification, City Clerk, Starboard Grill is opening up a second location?
Mr. Mayor, this is unit number 5 at the Harbour Quay, formerly Sweet Pea Coffee and Desserts, and the assets of that business were purchased by the Starboard Grill. So they will be opening, doing business as Portside Cafe, offering essentially the same as before, which is specialty coffees, desserts, that sort of thing. So it's another location. Yeah.
Okay. You thought they were going into competition with themselves?
No, it's just I was worried that somebody would see the rent that Starboard Grill was paying and go,
Yeah, okay. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And Council, as we well know, October 20th, we have an upcoming municipal election, and we have a motion, we have a request for appointment of officers that are necessary for this. Councillor Minions, do you want to make that motion?
That the city clerk, Davina Hartwell, be appointed as chief election officer and Tanis Feltrin be appointed as deputy chief election officer for the October 20th, 2018 general municipal election.
Seconder?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor? Carried. And from the Director of Development Services, we have information on the nuisance property working group. We have his report dated January 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is to inform council that a working group has been formed with frontline city inspection staff, fire staff, supervisors, and RCMP, essentially to take a look at some of the issues that we're having. This group will be bringing forward properties for council to consider under the nuisance abatement bylaw. Council's already given direction on one property at 3118 3rd Avenue, and that report will be prepared and brought forward to a future council meeting. And this working group has identified some other properties that we're letting council know that we will also bring forward to future council meetings for you to consider under the nuisance abatement bylaw. And we will bring in other agencies as needed in this working group. So it's an informational report to let you know that we're looking at these things, and we'll be bringing issues and properties forward to you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Minions?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this report, and I'm happy to see that this working group has started. After we passed our first nuisance bylaw, nuisance property bylaw, somebody brought it to my attention that it may have the effect of discouraging people from calling for emergency services when needed. I'm wondering if that's something that the working group could put their minds to. I know, I'm not sure specifically what our bylaw says about like calling for an ambulance, for instance. But there could be situations where police calls are discouraged when they're needed as well. I definitely support the bylaw we put forward, but it might be something we want to clarify or think of ways to stop, unintended consequences from that bylaw.
So just one thing, and we can bring it forward again, but there's a definition within the nuisance abatement bylaw of what a nuisance is. So an emergency, a medical call, is not going to attract a charge, right? That's not a nuisance. So it's only when a call that's going to that property that meets the definition of what a nuisance is, would there be a charge for that. So emergency, medical calls, those kinds of things are not going to attract that kind of.
That's great. So it might be something that we want to just make sure that buildings that are impacted by the bylaw, if we have
Sure.
more,
Absolutely.
we put out proper information on it so everyone's clear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Councillor McClellan, do you want to make the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would move that the report dated January 16, 2018, the Director of Development Services, excuse me, regarding the nuisance property working group be received.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
And if I could, just for voting on that, just ask a question. Who composes the nuisance property working group? That's a big word.
It's city staff and some representatives from the RCMP, and we could bring other agencies in if need be. So it's our inspection staff, our bylaw enforcement supervisors, managers.
So we got the bylaw enforcer, we got the
Yes.
building inspector, and
Fire is
fire
there,
and police, and, okay.
and management stuff.
Just curious, because I just said group and interested, and I noticed that one or two of the properties that we mentioned earlier have started to at least clean up their outside a bit and look a little bit better. So it's probably a good idea to bring some more forward. So talk about that later.
Okay, I have a question to ask. It's not quite in the category of a nuisance property yet, but it is a property that we have identified. So I'm actually not sure whether it's better here or under the status report. And that's the Arrowview property.
Okay. It's under a different. We're proceeding with that under a different section of the community charter.
Right.
So the new owner, it changed ownership, and a letter was provided to that new owner, giving him a deadline of when he needs to get something to the city in writing. That is, I'm not sure of the exact date, but it's the end of this month. And if he hasn't got something to us in writing that's to the satisfaction that we've asked for, then we will be bringing forward the requirements under the community charter to declare that building to have it demolished, essentially.
Okay, thank you. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. And Mr. Smith, truck counts. Can you explain the numbers to us, please? And one question, since you're explaining, and I know you're really good at the explaining part, I didn't notice Anderson Avenue covered on this, and so maybe in the other 1,500 pages of this report, somehow it was dealt with.
So we did some truck counts in September for 3 days, and we did them at 7 different locations. 2 were on Anderson Avenue, at Anderson Avenue in Ship Creek and Anderson Avenue at Argyle. So those intersections were 2 of the 7 intersections that were part of this traffic count information. And so the traffic counts are awfully detailed. They are everything from all the combined vehicles to, they broke it down into subcategories on the various types of trucks to give us a better idea of the types of vehicles that are using these intersections. And as is indicated in the staff report, given the number of locations, the 3 days that were done, and the subcategories, it's over 1,500 pages worth of data. I've attached 2 subsections just to get the idea of what that data looks like. And probably the easiest to understand is actually the diagram, where it shows you a diagram of that intersection and gives you some numbers that are turning at that, doing those traffic movements. The data is the detail is all here, but like I said, the diagram is for most lay people, that's the easiest thing for them to understand. All of the data will be available on the City of Port Alberni's website. It's up there currently. So if they're a real data person, they can go in there to their heart's content and take a look at it. But for people who are just interested in taking a look at a little bit of information, that diagram might be the most informative for most people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. And certainly at this point we're being asked to receive it, but in budget we're asked to consider it for its implications in terms of budget.
So in the options list in your budget, you have a proposed study that would take this data, crunch the numbers, do some analysis, and then look at trying to come up with potential improvements to our road infrastructure for a potential truck route that is not in the multi-millions of dollars that we have previously looked at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Boy, it's detailed, but, for me, and I'd be looking for more of a summary in it, of more particular interest is heavy vehicle traffic in Upper Third and on Anderson. And I think that's part of our goal is to look at alternatives to get those trucks out of one of our prime commercial areas. And I'd love to see just a kind of a summary of those particular areas. And I realize the outlying area, Redford Street and everything is all part of that. But I'd really like to see kind of a summary, and it's not included in this report, on Upper Third and on Anderson.
So Upper Third and Third Avenue was done extensively as some of the intersections, and like I said, all that is in there, and it's all broken down into, like, you've got, like, regular vehicles, utility trucks, logging trucks, RVs, emergency dump trucks. So all that is subcategorized and broken down within the data that's there. It is difficult to do a summary report on something like this. That's you've got 1,500 pages of data.
I'm more interested in the heavy vehicle traffic than
Yep.
than in other places.
Well, most of that data is the heavy vehicle, heavy vehicle traffic, but it's broken down very much into types of heavy vehicles that we're looking at. Even articulated trucks and buses, and all that is broken down for us to be able to look at and disseminate.
Okay, Councillor Alemany.
Yeah, I know it's already in the options list, and it's something I think that's definitely worth supporting, just because it's a huge amount of data. Even the 2 pages that you provided is, it's pretty overwhelming stuff. And isn't that supposed to be Stamp Avenue there? Okay, because that threw me for a loop. I think we do need to get kind of a good summary of it, because the way it is now, it's just raw data, so it's hard to make any decisions out of
It is raw data,
that.
and the going forward is just not to review the data, but it's to take that data to be able to justify potential road infrastructure improvements that we think we can justify to do. That isn't $10 million, right?
Okay, Councillor Paulson, do you want to make that motion to receive it?
Did we already do that? Nope. Okay, that the report dated January 16th, 2018, from the Director of Development Services providing information regarding the traffic count study undertaken in Port Alberni in September 26 to 28, 2017 be received.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. And Council, before we move on the current status report, City Clerk, what's the actual date for the council's review of the status report? Do you happen to have that information?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to target February the 19th for a special meeting to review status report, as has previously been directed by council to review those priority items every 6 months. So February the 19th, we have a scheduled budget meeting that day as well. So
Okay.
Thinking perhaps a 3 p.m. time for that meeting might work.
Okay, thank you. Because I do notice a few of the items on there, a number of the items on there have been dealt with, and so be appropriate time to take them off. All right. Any questions, Council, on the status report? Then, Councillor Washington, do you want to move receipt of that report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the current status report be received.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. And brings us to managers' monthly reports, Parks, Recreation, and Heritage. Welcome, Director Thorpe.
Thank you. So you've got the report in front of you there. 3 items to touch on and then turn it over to council for any questions. First had a very positive meeting with the Heritage Commission on January 15 to update the language in the current Heritage Commission bylaw. And so council can look forward to receiving a copy of suggestions of updated language in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Secondly, our Perfect Mind recreation software implementation timeline. We can now confirm that we'll be going live internally on that software on February 13. And so that'll be in conjunction with our spring program registration. And then the public will have access to online registration for the first time ever, actually, in conjunction with the start of our summer registration, which is on May 15. And thirdly, had a productive meeting last week regarding hosting the large-scale events as well as the plans for Canada Day celebrations in 2018. And so that collective group, there was about a dozen of us around the table. Councillor Paulson was there as well, and that collective determined that a positive way forward with that group, where of course the Women's Business Network had sort of resurrected or saved Canada Day for the last handful of years, we're looking to approach organizations rather than individuals to keep the workload manageable for all. So we're looking at reaching out to a dozen or so organizations to step up as a collective to run the subcommittees for whatever that Canada Day celebration might look like. And there was also very positive feel around the room as well about hosting or looking at bidding on some larger scale events as well. So very positive exchange.
So part of that consideration, would it be the location of our Canada Day celebration?
Absolutely.
And associated parade and so on?
Yeah, whatever that might look like. One of the great things is that the Women's Business Network has actually pulled together essentially a playbook or a manual of how to run the event as it's been run previously. They're also happy to sort of mentor new volunteers to turn that event into all sorts of different directions as well. So it's a neat opportunity coming up.
I really like a couple of pictures you have in there. I like all the pictures, but I like the one of the Birch Room in Gyro.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been in there personally to see it, but the picture is pretty impressive.
Yes.
And then the repairs into the grandstand. What are you thinking about in terms of sort of targeted completion for the grandstand?
Expect this spring. So once the weather continues to improve. Today was glorious for most of the day. So when we can get some weather like that sort of compounding, we predict in the spring. So the goal, of course, before we open in the spring to ball tournaments, etc.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely something that we've needed. So I'm glad the city staff has been working on that one for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments, Council? Councillor Alberni?
Just a question on you mentioned the Roger Creek Park is getting a new playground. Is that kind of all the playground equipment there? Not the water park, but all the playground equipment there?
Yes.
'Cause there's quite a bit there.
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Minions, do you want to move receipt of that report?
Move receipt of the Director of Parks and Recreation's monthly report.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks.
And this brings us to our Inspector Hunter. Welcome, Inspector.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Apologize, I don't have any pictures for you. Willa and I, we always discuss that, whether she goes first or I go first. So I have some good news and bad news and in between in my report here.
Well, the pictures you have, you're not allowed to show them anyway, are you?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. What I'd like to do is I'm going to go through some numbers, and then I'll have some narrative afterwards to speak about some things going on. I'll briefly touch on community policing station at that point as well. So this report is the fourth quarter of the year, and as well at the end of the report I summarize the entire year. So the report is definitely for the months of October, November, and December. Officers received and responded to 3,014 calls for service. That's the entire detachment area. 2,387 of these were in the city of Port Alberni. The actual number of criminal offenses were down 2% for the quarter, and overall the entire year criminal offenses were down 6%. This is not the case for property crime. It's up significantly for this quarter. It's at 308 compared to last year's quarter of 242 reported incidents of property crime. Property crime for the entire year is up 9% from last year. And you've heard me talk about recidivism before and repeat offenders, and we're continuing to have an issue there. I will quickly say regarding the overall property crime up 9%. For all of Vancouver Island, property crime is up 3%. There are several municipalities on the island, two of which are a higher population than us, one is slightly less, that have significant property increases, property crime. One of them's up 38%, another one's up 19%, and another one's up 8%. And that's not being indicated here as, we're doing okay, others have it bad. We're not doing okay with property crime, but we're not the only community suffering with this and looking for resolutions to our problems. I'm going to quickly go through a series of numbers to do with the quarter, and once again, this is 2016, and it'll be on the next page there, Davina, compared to 2017, and these are the number of reported calls for service that we received at the detachment, specifically in the municipality of Port Alberni. So our total calls for service went from 2,108 up to 2,387. I can tell you already this year, although we're only 3 weeks in, our calls for service are maintaining a significant increase. Violent crime, and this is a good news story, down from 101 down to 80 for the quarter. As we all know, stats came out, the CSI Violent Crime Severity Index, we were the number 2 in the province of municipalities over 10,000 and number 10 in the country. So it's good to see that we're bringing the violent crime down. Property crime, as already indicated, up from 242 to 308. Other criminal code offenses, and those are your breaches, cause disturbances, those types of events, 188 down to 125. Drug offenses, and a drug offense ranges anywhere from trafficking, possession, those types of things, from 26 up to 30, which brings our total criminal code for the quarter down from 557 to 543. And criminal code traffic, those are the serious traffic offenses, mostly impaired driving, up from 34 up to 42. So breaking down the crimes, assaults 46 down to 36 for the quarter. The serious assaults 19 down to 13. Harassment is down from 5 to 3. Robbery up from 3 to 5. Sex offenses up from 3 to 6. Uttering threats down from 15 to 11. And then of the 49 assaults, both serious and common assaults, 22 of those were domestic in nature, and that's down from last year's quarter of 31. Certainly working with Ellen's crew and our committees at the office here for education and awareness. I'm definitely pleased with those numbers. I'll quickly break down the property crime. Auto theft from 2 up to 6. Bike theft from 9 up to 11. Break and enter into businesses up from 13 to 20. Break and enter to residences up from 13 to 18. Break and enter other, those are sheds and compounds, mostly sheds, from 10 up to 17. We've had a reduction in mischief from 66 down to 57. General theft is up from 48 to 59. Possession of stolen property, there were 2 counts this quarter, 3 last year. Shoplifting, 26 up to 31. And you can see the previous 3 years, the quarters, shoplifting's a problem. It's a big problem in this community. We've made dozens and dozens of arrests of shoplifting in this past year, and some of them you've heard about, multiple shoplifting offenses. It continues to be a problem. I'm going to speak afterwards about a little story about shoplifting of one of our business owners. They did a great thing here a few weeks ago. Theft from vehicle is down from 37 down to 25. Fraud, we're continuing to see an increase in there. Just the venue of online, the ability to commit fraud is that much easier and many more opportunities. Cause disturbance, 77 down to 59. Breach of probation is down from 14 down to 11. Breach of bail, 42 to 37. The difference there, breach of probation, they've already gone to court, been convicted, and they're put on conditions to be good people. Breach of bail is we've arrested them, they haven't gone to court yet, and we've imposed conditions, or the courts, to be good until their trial. Intoxicated in public from 50 up to 57. Quickly, our collisions. We had one fatal collision this quarter. We all know the tragic event that happened just before Christmas. Injury collisions from 8 up to 10, and general damage collisions are down from 40 to 29. I think the weather is different this quarter than last year's quarter. So real quickly, for the entire year, we're up in calls from service in the city of Port Alberni from 8,964 to 9,191. Violent crime is down from 351 to 329. Property crime is up 8.6% from 1,037 to 1,126. The other criminal code offenses is down from 755 to 550. Drug offenses 108 to 115, bringing our total criminal code down from 2,251 down to 2,120. And our criminal code traffic, we've investigated more impaired drivers this year. Just some interesting things to speak to. We get, and used to be reported monthly here, crime, and there's not a lot of value in that. You can have some significant spikes. And interestingly enough, the first 4 months of 2017, property crime was actually down 10% in the community. We were doing really well. We were hitting that really, really hard. For the latter part of the year, from May to December, property crime was up 17%. And it just goes to show, and we're analyzing what's taken place in our community and what has caused that, and we're looking into that for sure. Interestingly, on Friday and Saturday, we arrested 3 chronic property offenders in our community. They were arrested, they were in breach, some had possession of stolen property, and I am not here saying they're responsible for all these property crimes that have happened, but since the one was arrested, the 3, so the last 4 days, there's been no B&Es, there's been no theft from vehicles. And I'm not saying these individuals are responsible for all of these, but it's a good example of your chronic offenders committing those crimes. So one was sent back to Alberta, significant charges out of Alberta, just a prolific thief that was in our community. It's great that they endorsed their warrants. That doesn't normally happen. They stay in our community, but they felt it fit to bring this person back. The other 2 have been remanded in custody. They appear in court on Wednesday for their breach charges. I want to talk real quickly, and it's in alignment with our surveillance cameras and potential initiatives to assist business owners with that. We had a couple weeks ago a business owner in the community, a very attentive business owner, noticed a couple of suspicious individuals in their business and made it uncomfortable for them, was following them around to the point where they had some property that they very well, we believe, intended to steal. They dropped it and they ran out of the store. The business owner was able to take photos of these individuals as well as the vehicle that they left in. Unbeknownst to the business owner, they were actually helping us solve crimes that hadn't even happened yet in our community, and I'll explain that. The business owner provided us with the photos, and we quickly found out who these individuals were. And fast forward a couple of weeks, and you may have heard we had a series in one night, over 15 vehicles or windows were smashed and items taken from the vehicle, theft from vehicle. And they were taking anything from a little box of Kleenex, anything they could see inside that vehicle, they were smashing windows and getting in there. Anyway, we have been able to identify persons of interest in that series of crimes based on a business owner and us looking at the surveillance video of these people in their shop 2 weeks earlier. And it's just part of that puzzle that we put together at the detachment. And when I always say call in, you never know. And this business owner wasn't even sure if they should call in because there wasn't an offense there. They didn't leave. They could have made an excuse, hey, this guy scared me, so we ran out of there. I get that it was an offense, but it's pretty suspicious, and it's helped us a long way. With that, The community needs to understand something as well. We do not need to get into vigilantism in this community. We have a strong social networking in this community, and just this past weekend somebody was posting photos from their surveillance of 2 individuals and asking the Facebook community to please identify those individuals. They received information and proceeded to go to this person's house. It's not a good idea. It's not the individual in the surveillance, and now this victim was arrested and is facing charges of assault and uttering threats. So what I do want is the community to get engaged, share information with the police, and then let us do the policing. It's just not appropriate, it's wrong, it's dangerous, and it needs to stop. I want to receive information, let me deal with it. Our Citizens Patrol, just real quickly, working with the president of Citizens Patrol and Corporal Amelia Hayden, are developing and just in the midst of developing a foot patrol program for our Citizens Patrol in the community, in the uptown area. Very excited about that. And just real briefly, the community policing office, Jack, you got it bang on. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. A community policing station is generally not a building just for volunteers to go in there and do their volunteer work, which is very important. A community policing station should have police officers in it, working with our volunteers. And I support having a community policing office in the 3rd and Argyle area, without a doubt. But it must be to the standard to have police officers in there with our computers. Like, I talked to the members about this. They're excited. They would love to situate themselves right there and do their paperwork and go out for a foot patrol and come on back. But there's a lot to it, and I really respect the community. Yeah, let's just put the community policing station there. Agreed. But there's a lot to it, and we've already had on-site meetings with the Bread of Life, and CAO Ply was there with me, and we're looking into it. But it's not as easy as just if our volunteers are there, there's police officers there, and Amelia Hayden would like to work in that office with our volunteers. So that's it for me. Any questions?
Okay, a couple of questions. Inspector Hunter? Does it ever seem overwhelming to your members?
As I stated at the committee of the whole, we're busy. We're call to call to call, and they're not overwhelmed. They're frustrated, for sure, but they're not overwhelmed. And it can be very frustrating at times when we prioritize calls. And as I stated before, there might be some calls that take us 3-4 hours to get to, or the next day. If it's not a life and limb, or we're not out already at something, it just may take a sidebar to it. And I'll really speak really quickly. Didn't have an opportunity the other day to speak to our youth liaison officer at the detachment, and this is a classic example. We do have a full-time youth liaison officer here. Absolutely, we do. And we also have all 34 of the city positions are filled. There's members at the detachment for every single position. That said, what happens is we have what we call soft vacancies. They're there, but they're not there. Parental leave, mat leave. For example, we have 2 members on parental leave at the moment, and 3 quite injured. Off-duty sick, we call it. We don't have the luxury of calling in a casual cop. We don't have the luxury of transferring in a member, because when the other folks come back, next thing you know, you're paying for 39 members, and I know CAO Ply and the rest of the city wouldn't be happy with that. So we have these soft vacancies. The school liaison officer was redeployed for operational reasons, and it'll make sense to everybody real quickly here. We have minimum resources out there to handle our calls for service. And when we reach that, below that minimum, we have to call somebody in on overtime. And we have a watch where it would be consistently, every shift, calling in overtime at $1,000 a shift, or we redeploy our resources where they're needed, life and limb protection of individuals. I'm not saying the school is not important, but any business person would see the logistics in moving our resources around as efficient as we can be, protecting the community. And that's what that's all about with the youth liaison officer. If our crime trends continue, as chief of police, I'm very much solely responsible for the safety of this community, and will continue to deploy the resources where required. And since that meeting where the students came in and they did a great job, we've had another member injured on that same watch for at least 8 weeks not at work. So the redeployment will continue until we're flush enough to have them back. And I will quickly answer a question that I know is surfacing out there as well. If we had funding for another member, 35 instead of 34, can we guarantee a youth liaison officer that won't be redeployed? And the answer is no. That would be completely irresponsible of me to say that, to have a youth liaison officer somewhere when all you know what's hitting the fan over here and we need some resources. The likelihood of them being pulled away would be less, but certainly it's no guarantee that they would stay there based on resource allocation.
Okay, thank you. So I still have two questions. One is, how much crime, in your opinion, particularly when it comes to the property crime, do you suspect might be going unreported? And the second one is, when it comes to shoplifting, is it actually possible to offer some sort of training program for store owners, shop owners, for ways that they may be able to address the concerns for shoplifting, maybe the way they display their goods or supervise their goods in the store? Or
Certainly. Answer your first question there. I do believe most of our property crime is being reported. There are some minor events where people feel they don't want to bother the police, and I would encourage people, the stats will go up. I get that. But you never know if you're solving a crime that hasn't happened yet 2 weeks down the road because of that information that you're giving us. Like I said, we have a very strong social connection out there on the internet, and there's lots of talk that happens, most of it good. And I do believe a lot's being reported. With regards to business owners and shoplifting, absolutely. If anyone wants to have our office meet with them to provide advice and guidance, and certainly prevent things like taking things into your own hand and making things dangerous. We would love to speak to that. And many of the businesses, the larger ones in the community, have store security that they've hired just for that purpose as well.
just thinking, for some of our business associations, that might be something they may want to engage in.
Yeah.
Some sort of training program.
Real
for the
quickly
members.
with the business and the Uptown, as we all know, a week or so ago, Neil Crossman was placed on a red zone, conditions not to be in the Uptown area on 3rd between the BMO and down Argyle up to 4th, I believe it was. He was located in that area on the weekend and arrested. Received a jail sentence today for that. But it's a classic example. Neil does not belong with the police. He needs some help. And I think that's what we're talking about in the community. There's lots of folks like that need some help to get them out of the police and into the services where they belong. But I just thought I'd share that with you. Ultimately, it's not the right answer. The right answer is to get these folks some help so we don't have to put them on conditions.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? And Councillor Sobey, do you want to move receipt of the report?
That the quarterly report from the RCMP providing information about current department operations be received.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Inspector Hunter.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, Council, that brings us to bylaws. First one is from our public hearing from today. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A public hearing was held in council chambers today at 5:45 p.m. There were 2 applications for consideration, so the hearing was held in 2 parts with 2 members of the public in attendance. The first part was Clark Power applying to amend the zoning bylaw to facilitate the subdivision of property at 3665 12th Avenue into 2 residential parcels, both of which would exceed the minimum lot size in the R3 zone, which is 350 square meters. The proposed bylaw is zoning bylaw amendment number 28, 3665 12th Avenue, bylaw number 4955. And the second part of the hearing was M. Sutherland applying to amend the zoning bylaw to facilitate several light industrial uses on the property at 2170 Mallory Drive. The proposed bylaw there is zoning text amendment T12, site-specific uses P1 institutional, bylaw number 4956. In both cases, the Director of Development Services provided background information, and no correspondence or other public input was received on either application. And it was a short public hearing which terminated at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you, City Clerk. Councillor Alberni, would you like to move receipt of that report, please?
That the verbal report from the City Clerk of the public hearing held January 22nd, 2018 regarding bylaw number 4955 and 4956 be received.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. And then we have zoning map amendment. Councillor Sauvé, would you like to?
That the zoning bylaw map amendment number 28 for 3665 12th Avenue, C. Powers, bylaw number 4955 be read for a third time.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And Councillor Sauvé again?
That the zoning bylaw text amendment number T12 site-specific use P1 institutional, bylaw number 4956 be read a third time.
Seconder? All in favor? Carried.
That the zoning bylaw text amendment number T12 site-specific use P1 institutional, bylaw number 4956 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal and numbered 4956.
Second that, Mr. Mayor, but I just have a quick question for the Director of Planning.
Yes.
I know he's got another name, but I can never remember it. What we are voting on here, which, you know, is good, is at that property, is that zoning that is originally there, does that permit residences in there? Just curious.
So the current zone is institutional, so it allows some types of residential uses like extended care homes, those types of residential uses, but not single-family residential, for instance.
Okay. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Smith. And from the Director of Finance, temporary borrowing bylaw for the Somas Estuary Environmental Stewardship Protection. We have a report providing information for the next step and inquiring the necessary financing. Councillor Washington, would
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the report from the Director of Finance dated January 12, 2016 be received.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any questions on the report?
I'll second the report on 2018.
Okay.
2016.
Got it. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Washington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the temporary boring Somas Estuary Environmental Stewardship Protection Bylaw number 4957 now be introduced and read a first time.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
That the temporary boring Somas Estuary Environmental Stewardship Protection Bylaw 4957 be read a second time.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, question, Councillor McCall.
Yeah, I'm just curious how close we're coming to the actual total that we're spending on the estuary, and also for how close we are to borrowing what we are allowed to without going to referendum.
Thank you. Director Rothwell?
Councillor McClellan, would you mind repeating your question specifically?
We've got an amount here, $4,450,000.
Yes.
That's what we're voting on, I believe, for this temporary borrowing. Is that correct?
That's right.
And then when we get there, how close are we to being at a maximum amount of borrowing before we have to go to a referendum for something?
We have to go to a public referendum process. If we have about a $3 million window left after the 4 million, after the 4.4 million. And the 4.4 will get us to the end of the sewage lagoon project.
Thank you. I hope so.
I do too.
Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And Councillor Washington, one more.
That the temporary borrowing Somas Estuary Environmental Stewardship Protection Bylaw 4957 be read a third time.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. And Council, we have zoning amendment number 25 on Regina Avenue. We have a report regarding consideration of public hearing date for bylaw 4948. Councillor Minions, are you prepared to make that motion?
That zoning bylaw amendment number 25, 4850 Regina Avenue, Knutson, bylaw number 4948, be advanced to a public hearing on February 13th, 2018 at 6 p.m. in the City Hall Council Chambers.
Your seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, Council, that brings us to correspondence for action. And the first one is from Phaedra Arsenault. We have an email dated January the 11th requesting that the City of Port Alberni create a bylaw pertaining to panhandling. And Councillor Paulson, if you're prepared to make that motion, I actually have something that I want you to consider adding to it.
That the email dated January the 11th, 2018, from Phaedra Arsenault requesting that the City of Port Alberni create a bylaw pertaining to panhandling be received.
And I think maybe we should have direct back to staff for review and possible recommendation.
No, I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor, and ask a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
And the
Are
whole
you okay
thing-
with that?
Okay, the whole,
Absolutely.
what
Okay.
both of you said is a motion, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. You got that? Good. No, my question is, like, already we have panhandlers, I don't know if that's a good word or a bad word, in the storefronts, and the RCMP are able to move them on. And like the inspector just told us, they don't belong with the police. The ones that we have have other problems, schizophrenia and other things. So is there not enough law now to move them, because they are able to move them? What more could they do if we had a bylaw? I'm all for bylaws, but I just want to know if they could do more.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sauvé?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to the question by Councillor McLennan, the law that we do have in place right now, specifically under the criminal code and the actions that the police have been implementing in solving a few issues, is dealing with aggressive panhandlers, which is a big difference. If this bylaw is created or even thought about, it would be anybody that's requesting with a handout with the money or something. We have noticed an increase in panhandling with new people in town, specifically in the area of the Walmart parking lot in Johnson Corridor. So the difference is aggressive panhandling. We do have a law protecting us for that right now. This is just regular panhandling.
Okay, thank you. But it is looking for staff review and possible recommendation.
Yeah, the only concern, I would like to see what other cities,
Yeah.
requesting that report would be great.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. And Council, from the Alberni Valley Drag Racing Association, we have a letter dated January 15th requesting use of Stamp Avenue. Councillor Sauvé, are you prepared to make that motion?
The council for the city of Port Alberni allowed the Alberni Valley Drag Racing Association to use Stamp Avenue from Rogers Street to Redford Street from 2 p.m. on August 9th, 2018 until 10 p.m. on August 12th, 2018 for the Thunder in the Valley 2018, and that they be requested to work with the city staff to ensure all safety, liability, and insurance requirements are in place.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion, Councillor McClellan?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know we get this every year, and when they first asked us, we did the work as a city to get the place ready and told them we want them for at least 5 years. We're putting that in expense in. Do they have to ask us each year, or is this something that for insurance or what?
I'm not sure. CAO, do you know the answer to that question?
Mr. Mayor, it does involve, closing streets, which council does need to approve, and it just gives authorization to staff that council is supportive, and, we can ensure that the necessary steps are in place and that we do get the insurance liability requirements.
Personally, I like it because it reconfirms our support each year as a council.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just that we did ask them for 5, and I guess they're on 3 or something now, but that's fine.
Yeah. Be 60% of the way there by the end of this year. Okay, Councillor Alamani?
Just wondering, are there any cost implications this year?
CAO, are you anticipating any extra
Other than
cost?
staff time, I guess.
Staff time, of course, but there's no funds requested, so the city will endeavor not to expend funds. It seems that we do incur some costs. We, for example, we modify the traffic signals, and that's a cost that we incur. And but we try to minimize any overtime or any other costs.
But it's not significant, major the way it was the first year, right?
The first year was a difficult year, yeah.
Right. Okay. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Council. From Timber West Council, we have a letter dated January 10th providing information regarding their access policy and how they accommodate public access on private lands. Councillor McClellan, if you're prepared to make that motion, I have a little piece that I would suggest adding on to the end of it.
I move the letter dated January the 10th, 2018, providing information regarding their access policy and how they accommodate public access on private lands, such as well as information regarding their internal access committee be received. And the motion does not say who we're accepting their letter from. It's Timber West.
Exactly, and my suggestion is that we invite them to a future meeting.
I would agree with that, and make note, now that the motion is done, does someone second that?
Not yet.
Okay, then now that the motion is, that make note that this letter is on our webpage with our agenda for this packet, and I don't know how easy it is for the public to get it. Sometimes I'm even able to. But if we could have that letter available, that would be good.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sauvé, and then Councillor Alamani.
Just a short question, Mr. Mayor, is that, have we not invited them in the past? Or was that just to discuss issues?
They were actually invited in the past, and then that invitation was withdrawn when we had some other concerns. Because they were invited at the same time as Island Timber, and we would make this one a separate invitation just for Timber West.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Alamani?
My question was around Island Timberlands, so have we had any communication with them afterwards? Would we still, because they're the ones who are actually, I would say, closer to town, so I think
we actually have had some communication from them, and they offered to provide us with some information, but that hasn't happened yet, so we'll have to follow up on that, Councillor Alamani. Councillor Paulson?
Just so everybody knows, I think on Timber West website, and also they have they've produced a handout or a brochure with regards to information for gaining access to the Outback, and also the encouragement. They actually list some of the groups or clubs that are they're part of that are pre-approved in the brochure, and it's very interesting because there are two sides to every story. So it's a very well produced document. I suggest anybody have a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say one more thing?
Councillor Alamani?
I just worry, and I was looking at the Timber West letter, And it looks very much to me like what the direction is, that they will only be giving access to certain groups that they approve of. And I think that's a very bad direction for us to go in as a community. The community wants public access. The community wants to be able to access the outback, the back roads, when they want to access those recreational services. So I think that's a dangerous road to go down, if I could put it that way. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, which is why I would like to see them invited to a future meeting so that we can ask those questions. Okay, on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And from the City of Port Alberni's Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee, they've presented us with their annual report. Councillor Alberni, do you want to make that motion?
Yes, if I can go back here. That the 2017 annual report from the Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni directs staff to prepare a report on implications of each of the recommendations for Council's consideration.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any discussion?
If
Councillor,
you'd like, I could go through the recommendations if Council wants.
Councillor McClement?
Okay, is the motion that we direct staff to do these 10 things?
That not that we do them, but that they come back to us with recommendations in terms of their implications for
Mr. Mayor, that is quite expensive with all that staff time. I would recommend, this is a quick thing, then some of those things look okay. I would recommend that the committee, Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee, form subcommittees and look at these things and bring to us what they feel should be there. I think that to have staff, we've just given them a whole bunch of work on the uptown and so on. And my feeling is that we do have a committee, and they seem very energetic in these things, that they would form a subcommittee and come to us, because these all have budget implications with using staff.
Okay, Councillor Sauvé?
I understand Councillor McLennan's concerns, but the thing is, they did come up with several recommendations, 10 of them, that honestly I would like to see what we can or cannot accomplish within a community. So I'm looking forward to the report from staff.
Councillor Paulson?
I agree on both fronts. I just found that the 9 proposals were somewhat vague for me, and there was really no action plan. I call it a business plan when you do each one of these, and there's estimated costs. I don't know where they got the figures from or why they figured it would come from a certain fund. I would prefer to see more specifics, and the Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee, I think that if they made it a practice of having a more detailed action plan, I would like to see that if I could, and that's just, I found them quite vague in some areas. So,
Councillor Minions?
Thank you. I'm actually a bit concerned as well about the staff time, and I think in general I like the concept of moving forward with a lot of these ideas, but it seems that our Director of Development Service often ends up doing the work from this committee, which is not a bad thing, but I'm noting that we have had been waiting on a report for secondary suite for about 2 years, and that's a long time to be waiting on something, because I think we're overtaxing our Director of Development Services time. So I would like to see more information on these, but looking at priorities as a council, I think we may want to send this back to the committee for more work before we send it to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Minions. Councillor Alberni?
So to the point, I think if you were to send it back to the committee, which I'm sure the committee would be more than happy to take it back, the committee's next step would be to engage with staff. So whether we engage with staff through the committee or council directs staff to engage with staff on the recommendations, either way, staff is going to be requested to help out.
Okay, so if I'm correct, if we send it back to the committee, a big chunk of the work that we would otherwise just simply be pushing over onto staff would involve the committee itself. And I look at the report and I'm amazed at the amount of work that your committee's done, and I have to tell you, I'm incredibly impressed that the work that the committee that you are the liaison on for the council, but it's our committee. I'm really impressed with the work. I'm impressed with the recommendations. I'm impressed with the 3 years worth of work. We've achieved a lot of stuff as a result of the work of this committee. So I'm really proud of what's been done. But I'm also really conscious of not overtaxing staff. So I'd like to see your committee do just a little bit more work and do whatever can be done at the committee level to reduce what we're requesting of city staff to do, because it's massive amounts of time, and I know you personally put a lot of time into it, and your committee has as well. But it's good work. It's important stuff to be done. So I'd like to see it, frankly, go back to the committee as well. So Councillor Alemani's motion is reporting on the going to staff and reporting on implications of each of the recommendations. It wasn't seconded? It was seconded. It's either getting late, Councillor Washington, or we're getting older. I guess, every second of every day we're getting older. So we have a motion in front of us. And we have two choices. Either Councillor Alemani could withdraw his motion and rephrase it. We send it back to our Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee, or we can defeat the motion and or pass the motion, whatever council wishes. Councillor Alemani?
Why don't we just change the word staff to the Food Security Climate Disruption Committee, and then we can prepare a report as we go.
Councillor Washington, are you fine with that?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I do have a 1 year not working tonight. I apologize.
Change the word staff to Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee.
In other words, we'll send it back to the
direct
committee.
Send it back, yeah,
committee.
okay. That's
Okay. So all those in favor of sending it back to the committee for more information? Carried. Thank you. Now, Council, we get on to proclamations.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, we have a late item.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a late item, and I have it in front of me. You're absolutely right.
It's the late item from Roland Smith, dated January 22nd, with questions related to loan authorization bylaw number 4939. And Mr. Mayor, we would recommend that council receive the letter and that staff come back with a report responding to the questions at the next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Sauvé?
Yeah, I'm very looking forward to the answers to this letter, so I would make the motion to receive the letter and get staff to draft off a response to council so we can make it public. Thank you.
Okay, for our next meeting.
That's right.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second the motion, although once again, we're giving staff a whole bunch of work to do, and we've just piled up on them. And this is dated January 22nd, Mr. Mayor. And I believe every citizen has a right to approach council, but we do have a time when the agendas are set, and it's only a couple of days ahead of the meeting. It's not long. And, we get a lot of letters like this, and some of them are very emergent, but I don't know. I know we have to answer, so we will. But I'm getting to a point, I guess, where I think we're giving staff an awful lot of work to do, and then things we want done, like already mentioned by Councillor Minion's secondary suite report, it's not getting done. So I think we have to have a very good meeting when we look at our priorities on whatever that date was that Davina told us.
Right. Councillor Sauvé?
Yeah, in response to that statement, I would say that I'm sure the writer of this letter inquiring the questions. I understand how staff is busy, and he didn't make any motion that he required an answer at a certain date. So just to the fact that it gets responded to, is addressed, is good enough. I'll leave it to staff to set priorities on this.
Okay, so there's no particular date then that you're,
Yeah,
okay?
that's right. Thank you.
So, yes, Director Rothwell.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's just with the temporary borrowing bylaw going to adoption at the next meeting, it's probably good that you have the answers to Mr. Smith's questions prior to that.
Okay.
So you have a fully informed decision. And I had made plans to have that report ready for you
For our next meeting.
for next Monday.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we can still leave it up to staff? We don't have to mention a date, knowing that it'll come?
I'm very satisfied to leave it to staff. I just, when time appropriate, and she recognized that time is appropriate, that it gets answered.
Okay, on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And then that brings us to proclamations. We have a letter from the Port Alberni Shelter Society, and let's see, sorry, Councillor Minions, do you want to make that motion?
That the letter received January 17th, 2018, requesting that February 6th, 2018 be proclaimed as Raise the Roof Took Tuesday in Port Alberni be received and the day proclaimed as requested.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And City Clerk, we have some informational correspondence.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just a few items. The resolutions, notice, and request for submissions and call for nominations for the upcoming Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities is provided with a deadline of February 14th. The Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission have submitted their minutes from December 6th. Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee minutes from December 7th. And a copy of a letter from the City of Victoria to the BC Minister of Justice and Attorney General requesting that the Government of BC review and modernize the BC Motor Vehicle Act to increase safety on BC roads.
Thank you. Any council wish to pull anything out of any of those? Councillor Paulson, do you want to move receipt and file on those? Thank you.
That informational correspondence items numbered 1 through 4 be received and filed.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. There is no report from in-camera, so council, that brings us to our council reports. And the first one is from me. Just a quick update in terms of what I've been doing. February the 8th, I had a discussion with the president of Timber West to look at some ways that Timber West can be of assistance to the community. February 10th, I was in Victoria attending the Coast Fiber Advisory Board working group. Since I was there anyway, I met with one of our Vancouver Island MPs, and I also took another opportunity again since I was there to have a meeting with a major investor for the city. February the 13th, I was at the Sikh Temple.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
You mean January, don't you?
I'm sorry. You're right. These are all January dates. January the 13th, thank you. I was at the Sikh Temple for a special event. It was a weekend-long celebration. And then the 15th, I met with some other investors who are thinking of significant investment in our community. The 16th through the 18th, I was at the Truck Loggers Convention in Victoria. Tremendous workshops there, panel discussions, great information. But boy, all that sitting is really hard on your body, I have to tell you that. And February the 19th, I came back to Port Alberni a little early so that I could participate in the Poverty Working Together to Reduce Poverty. Over 100 people there, organized by the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network. Some great information. The Could have been more information because there could have been more feedback from the participants themselves, but it was a session where some information got out, and lots of people were there ready to help in any way they can. Council, that's my report. Move acceptance of the report. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And from the regional district, Councillor McClellan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was there with Councillor Polson a couple of weeks back, so I'll give a brief report, and if Councillor Polson has something he wants to add, then that would be fine. He actually made a motion he wanted to be noted. He made his first motion at the ACRD meeting, and definitely changed the whole course of the meeting. We had 2 reports, 2 presentations at the meeting. One from Dave McCormick, Port Authority, on the transshipment port and so on, and gave a very good upbeat and updated report. We had one from Heather Shoby from her farm out on Karen Place, and she's also the regional district's agricultural person. I'm not sure what her exact title is because I keep forgetting, but she gave us quite a long presentation on water and suggestion on using, especially for farmers, if they were to save water, particularly in areas where it's not as readily available as it is, say, in the city. And so it was a lot of good ideas on saving rainwater and using water off the hills and so on. So that was very good. And there was also I guess a request or a presentation to make a motion. The Uchaklesip First Nations are looking to change the name of Henderson Lake to Hucliklis, and it's HUCKTLTS. And I'm not sure exactly how to say it, but I promised them if they make it so I could say it, I would use it. So, and that basically, Mr. Mayor, concludes my report. And if Mr. Councillor Polson has more, he can add it.
No, I think you got it covered.
Okay. Then I move my report.
And second.
Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Then that brings us to councillors' reports. We'll start with Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Just the meeting on January 15th with the Heritage Commission to go through bylaws 4687 to establish a Heritage Commission. The whole meeting was just on the whole bylaw, so we've got everything written down. All the comments will go back to Jamie Morton, who will then send them back to Director Thorpe, and hopefully have something for the council at the next council meeting. And just a quick reminder that Film Fest, Sunday, January 28th, it's the Hedy Lamarr story at the Landmark Cinema, so go out and help support our Heritage Commission, and that's my report, sir.
Thank you. And Councillor Alberni?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only meeting I had this past couple of weeks was with the Food Security Climate Disruption Committee. So that was just our 2017 annual report. We focused on that. I had a meeting with the Transportation Committee scheduled, but it was canceled. So that's all for me.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Minions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a Vancouver Island Regional Library AGM. One thing that came out of that is that they are still working on the plans for an update at the Port Alberni branch. So there was a large donation made by a Port Alberni resident. They're planning to do a layout change and some furnishing upgrades. So at some point we will get that in our branch, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it, and they're working on a lot of updates in other branches. And I also attended the poverty reduction workshop put on by our MP and MLA, and was happy to be there and happy to see so many people there that you don't often see out at other meetings. So it was nice to see a good cross-section of the community there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Paulson?
I got to cover for the mayor at the mayor's business breakfast, and there was a presentation put on by McLean Mill, and McLean Mill, they're very proud of their corporate retreats and their weddings and those sorts of things, and their ability to do that. So they actually had a presentation more centered around those types of events. Thank you very much. I find that event very enlightening, because at the end of it, we have a round table, and the school district is there, Community Futures is there, the Port Authority, the Sand Group was there, and they give us an update. Catalyst Paper was there. They give us an update on their the present day operations. Attended the ACRD meeting, and thanks for letting me attend that as well. Also, I attended the event hosting meeting that Willa Thorpe was kind enough to host, and really what that BC Games has approached us in a number of years because they want us to host again, because we do a really, really good job. And I think this is in part of that. Also, with regards to Canada Day celebrations, they really, really need people to step up to the plate, and they need some younger blood. And in the event hosting thing, I've taken upon myself as kind of a committee of one. I have an inquiry into Hockey Canada right now to see what we would have to do to become an adoptive community for one of the international teams for the World Junior Hockey Championships, which are being held in Vancouver and Victoria next year, whether it be Team Norway or Austria or something like that. And I'm waiting for a reply back from them, but we could provide them with a kind of a training retreat with our facilities and adopt them into our community pre-tournament, and maybe even host a pre-tournament exhibition game. Maybe we would have Austria and Norway playing each other in our rink. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'm too late in the game on that one, but that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sobe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 18th of this month, I had the Advisory Planning Committee and discussed several issues that we entertained today and approved. Also on the 19th, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, which it was great to see the community share the ideas and how to deal with poverty reduction. This is going to help our province in developing new strategies. Just to remind the public that there's another opportunity to speak on this initiative, to discuss strategies at our very own Athletic Hall tomorrow, Tuesday the 23rd at 5:30 p.m. till 8:30. Thank you, and that's my report.
Thank you. And Councillor McClellan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, since the last time we met, I attended the Truck Loggers Association with you and found it in the main very helpful, and I wasn't able to come up for the poverty reduction meeting, as I stayed down to hear our own Chief Robert Dennis. He gave a very good presentation on keeping the forest as a working forest. And some of the things he said kind of surprised me, but I was very pleased to hear them, and it was quite good. He actually referred back to Port Alberni and gave us a boost, as when we were the highest average wage in the country, and it was because, he said, of the forest industry and the unions, and I think he's probably right. And also, I've been handing out the flyers, I don't know if you want to call them that, but the phone numbers to the businesses, and you've been handing out around town, and I've kind of picked up, and I find it very interesting. Just going to keep it up until they all get out, however long that takes. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll move all these wonderful reports from all these nice councillors.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Don't believe there's any new business, council. Councillor McClellan?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just make a notice of motion that I'll be bringing a motion next meeting to update our two bylaws, the one on nuisance properties and the one on maintenance building, or maintaining the build property, whatever that one's called. I'm not even sure, but I'll get that fixed up for next time.
Okay, thank you. And this brings us then to question period. It's an opportunity for public and the press to ask questions of Mayor or Council. Anybody wish? Yes, please come forward. Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah. So I just heard a comment about a form being, with telephone numbers being distributed, and that's going out to, is it all businesses in the uptown area? So I had heard that there was a mistake in one of the telephone numbers, and I'm not certain which it was, but anyway, I'd like to point out to council that there's a service called BC 211. BC 211 is both online and by telephone, and it is a complete registry of resources and services up to date that is maintained on a yearly basis. So it has health services, it has assault services, it has police services, fire, all the services available. And I think sometimes rather than us trying to recreate the wheel, that we need to take advantage of the services that are existing. It's very interactive and easy to use, and I strongly recommend that council members take a look themselves, and that when we're suggesting to members of the community where the resources are, that we send them to the place where the right information is.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else wish to address council? Okay, motion to adjourn.
Make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.